You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hello, I'm Steven Willis from the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. He is Michael Katz from the Northeast Mississippi Tupelo Daily Journal newspaper. I got it right that time. And we are doing our pregame show, as in about 18 hours, Ole Miss is going to be kicking off against the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. Michael, how you doing, bud?
I'm so excited to be on the road. I'm headed out tomorrow, first road trip. I still get the jitters. It's always fun.
Yeah, going out there and actually doing it is all right. The dread going up to it, knowing that you have to leave and everything, that's another story altogether.
Yeah, and I'm not a great packer, so this is gonna test me a little bit.
So before we get on the Ole Miss Wake Forest train, I do want to ask you about this because you are from Southern California. You are a Pac-12 person. So now that the Pac-12 is expanding to become the six-pack, what is going on there, and where do you think they go from here?
It's so bizarre because, like, I understand the draw of, the Mountain West schools that have been invited and that have accepted, of wanting to be part of, like, the brand, the Pac-12 brand. But I think what's sort of getting lost here is that, like, this isn't going to be the Pac-12 of old in terms of, they're not going to be an automatic qualifier for the playoff. They're going to be a group of 5, 6, whatever we want to call it now. I understand it sounds better than the Mountain West, but it's crazy because, I used to work in Boise, and Boise State's been, they were almost in the Big East in like 2012, like way back when. Like that was a thing. That was insane that was almost a thing. I think it was done in San Diego State. But I lived in Boise for, 4 years. And all they wanted is to be part of a bigger conference, and like they're sort of getting it. But I've also worked at Wyoming, which was my job before here. And, they're left in the Mountain West of like, what happens to us now because our biggest brands are now gone. So as, I was listening to Feinbaum earlier, I think Ari Wasserman was saying this is just going to lead to more realignment. This is all this does. It's crazy though. I like I kind of like the idea of the Tupac, whatever the Pac-12 as you called it, whatever. But I think for viability, yes, I think 6 makes sense. 8 they need. So it's kind of wild that they announced it without having the other 2 teams, because like what happens if it falls through? I don't know. For me at least, I like to know a plan's going to go through before I make a press release.
Yeah, they probably have an idea of what they're going to be able to do, but we'll see what happens. I mean, I like the idea, and the benefit that could come from all this is I think Air Force is going to end up in the American. And having Air Force, Army, and Navy all in the same conference for the first time. I think that's a good thing that comes out of all of this.
Yeah, no, I agree. But of course, we talked about this before the show, like Memphis always gets thrown around in these sorts of conversations. And it's like, just leave Memphis alone, please.
Yeah. It's like they're playing a game, just like I told you. They're playing a game of musical chairs, and there are no chairs. Yeah, and they just kind of are where they are. And Tulane, I get the idea and the appeal of Tulane because they've been good recently, but you don't have to dig very far to find when they weren't.
Yeah. I mean, really, it's within 5 years. It's right there.
So Ole Miss and Wake Forest is kicking off in between Dawson's Creek and a season premiere episode of Arrow on the CW tonight. That's 5:30 Central Time, 6:30 Eastern. This is not the Riley Skinner Wake Forest. This is not the Sam Hartman Wake Forest. I think they're 15th out of 17th team preseason picked in the ACC. But Hank Bachmeier is a pretty good quarterback. They have a couple of good wide receivers, and they have that tricky, gimmicky, long mesh play. And those things can make a first road game by Ole Miss at least difficult.
Yeah, I mean, Hank Bachmeier, again, like it's very crazy. His first year at Boise State was 2019, and I was still out there. his first start. He started his first game as a true freshman against Florida State in a game that was moved because of a hurricane, if I remember correctly. And he beat Florida State on the road. So fast forward now, and Hank Bachmeier is still in my life, which is I did not think that was ever going to be the case. But and Lane Kiffin said this week. This is by far the best passing game they will have seen thus far. It's a very competent passing game. I mean, I think Hank is 8th or 9th in the country in passing yards per game. His numbers are good. He hasn't turned the ball over. Now, their offensive line is a bit of a problem. I believe they gave up 6 sacks last week to Virginia. And, Virginia, maybe they end up having a nice season, but I don't think they were anyone's, power pick to have a breakout season. But, yeah, I mean, in terms of pure passing game, it'll be a test, and especially because Lane didn't sound particularly thrilled with how the pass defense played last week. And I know the numbers looked okay, but I think they expected better against a team like that, especially knowing that it's going to get worse in terms of quality of opponents.
Yeah, and the busts need to stop. I talked about that on my show this week. They have to figure out a way to clean it up, because if they don't bust against Furman, they basically give up 70 yards for the entire game. If they don't bust against MTSU, that 7-minute drive just doesn't happen, and that is the drive that stands out to Ole Miss fans, I do believe.
Yeah, and again, Hank Bachmeier is a strong arm kid. I mean, he was a big recruit. He can sling it, and he's been slinging it for 6 years. He's very good. So this is going to be really interesting. Again, are they the most talented team? No, but it is an ACC team. And it's their homecoming. Depends on who you ask how sold out it really is, but it is their homecoming.
What? Really?
Yeah,
what?
That's bold. That's a bold move to pick Ole Miss to be your homecoming. But
man, they're basically they're like replaying like prom night 2, sitting there with the homecoming queen at halftime. That game has a chance to be a public execution, and you're going to set that up for a celebration? Yeah,
I didn't believe it when I heard that, and then I looked on their website and I was like, oh, this is real. This is actually their homecoming. Maybe they scheduled it like 15 years ago. That's what I'm going to tell myself, because otherwise this doesn't make much sense.
Do you think Ole Miss breaks out the new uniforms? They have not released them by the time I recorded this. So by the time everybody hears this, they'll be out there. Do you think they're going to break out the new ones?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be a good time to. I would say like a prime time game. Like it's a Power 5 game. I know it's on the CW, but I think there's going to be a lot of eyes on that game, and I think again. You want to keep eyeballs, and you want to get people talking about your team, even in other ways besides the product on the field. The product's going to speak for itself, but people love uniforms and helmet combinations. So I could see them doing it, but I also could see them waiting until I don't want to say like a bigger game, but maybe a home game or something like that.
Yeah, it's right before the season finale of Smallville on the CW, or maybe Buffy the Vampire Slayer or something.
Maybe Seventh Heaven. I think Seventh Heaven.
Yeah. Something like that. The CW. I remember, like, what was the CW before the CW? It was something
like WB.
Yeah, it was the WB. That's right.
Yeah. Because I remember like Animaniacs was on there when I was a kid.
Oh, Animaniacs, man! I'll fight people over
Animaniacs. Great show.
That's amazing, amazing. Anyway, when we come back, we're going to continue to talk to Michael about the game today in Wake Forest and the storylines and some expectations and all of that good stuff that you're tuning in for. But right now, I do want to let you know, passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to level it up to peak performance: superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home some huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's guaranteed fit is only available to U.S. customers. Are you looking at it for a way to stay on top of your health and wellness goals? Factor is here to help. With Factor's no prep, no mess meals, you can fuel your body with chef-crafted, dietitian-approved dishes that fit your lifestyle, whether it's aiming for calorie smart or protein plus or even keto. Factor has something for everyone. And best part, Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Perfect for even the busiest of schedules, which, as we all know, Saturday is the busiest of schedules. With 35 different meals and over 60 different add-ons to choose from every week, you never get bored. Factor makes it easy to crush your wellness goals, offering premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and blackened salmon to keep your meals both healthy and delicious. Why spend hours in the kitchen when Factor meals can be ready in just 2 minutes? There's no shopping, no prepping, no cleaning up. From breakfast to dessert, Factor has you covered with nutritious restaurant-quality meals that make eating healthy a breeze. What are you waiting for? Head to factormeals.com/lockedon50 and use code LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box and 20% off your next month. That's factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50. So we're here with Michael Katz of the Northeast Mississippi Tupelo Daily Journal, and we are getting ready with this pregame show. We're airing at midnight on Saturday morning to get everybody ready when they first wake up. Michael, what are the storylines that you're going to be looking at in this game?
I'm looking at the offensive line still. Who's back? Because that sounds like something that is there could be guys coming back. I know they're always a little bit big.
I think Jerquan Scott.
Yeah, that's who I thought it would think it would be. Looking at that group, how do they stand up against a Power 5 defensive line or Power 4 defensive line? I'm curious on that. I also am really curious to see. If this is the kind of game where Ole Miss establishes the run early, or if they let Jaxson cook early and sort of just let him throw it all over the yard, because we've seen two very, very different sorts of approaches. And I know obviously Jaxson had a great game in, last week with 24 straight completions, but it was really Henry Parrish's show for the start of that game. In that first game, it was Jaxson throwing the ball anywhere and everywhere he wanted. So I'm curious to see what the plan is, and is it all Henry Parrish? Are we going to see more Bentley? Because he only has like 11 carries or whatever so far. When does he start getting more involved? Because we know how explosive he is when he's been in there in his career. I'm curious to see what their philosophy is, because whatever you think Lane Kiffin is going to do, he often does the opposite of what you think he's going to do in terms of what they're going to show you. So I think that's going to be really interesting. I'm also curious to see what happens if Ole Miss fumbles the ball and Wake Forest runs it back for an early touchdown. What happens when adversity actually hits this team? They haven't had that yet. And I know this is a veteran team. They've got a lot of guys who've been on the road a lot. They've played a lot of really big games, but you just never know with a new team. And this is a new team with new guys. How a team's going to react in situations like that. Now, I don't think that it's going to be a problem. I think this team is very mature. But Jaxson alluded to it. He wants to see what happens when adversity hits the team. He said that before the first game. If it does happen, how do they react to it?
I had Kenton Gibbs from Locked On ACC on my show this week, and he was talking about Wake Forest. And I asked him the question, what are the two weakest positions on Wake Forest's team? If you think something's going to go wrong, what are the two weakest positions? And his answers were the secondary and the offensive line. And going across from Ole Miss's defensive line and Ole Miss's wide receiver going against your problem points, this potentially is a nightmare matchup for Wake Forest.
Yeah, again, they gave up 6 sacks last week to Virginia, and no disrespect to Virginia, but I have to imagine Ole Miss's defensive line is probably better than Virginia's. It's going to be better than most of the teams that they face. It's one of the best in the country. I think this can be a game where we really see them feast, especially if guys like Princely are healthier. It sounds like he's getting healthier. the games have been so out of reach. We haven't really seen we've seen Walter Nolan dominate, but we haven't seen him dominate for a whole game because he hasn't really had to. They've been able to take him out. Obviously he got a little bit banged up in that last game. It sounds like he could have gone back in, but was it worth it when you're up by 30? This could be a game where you really see why he was as highly touted as he was, because a guy with that sort of athleticism and quickness and get off the ball. I mean, that guy against an offensive line that is porous, let's say. Goodness, I think a guy like that can feast. And like you said, Ole Miss's receivers are as good as anybody's. That having a leaky secondary isn't probably what you want in the game plan.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting before we get out of here is Ole Miss is third in the country in tackles for loss with 25, but they're like 35th in sacks. This isn't sacks bringing up this number. This is just you can't run the football against these guys. And I think that's more of a positive than anything else, because starting today against Wake Forest, you're probably going to start to see Pete Golding actually scheming against protections to figure out a way to pressure the quarterback, because Wake Forest is a passing team. They do that funky RPO, but they throw the ball downfield.
Yeah, I think it's become pretty clear it's going to be hard to run the ball on Ole Miss this year. And I don't, it's not like they're going to give it 27 yards a game for the entire season. But that run defense is legit. It's very, very good. They are really good up the middle. So when you start to make a team one-dimensional and you get guys like Princely being able to pin his ears back, and you can Pete scheming up guys off the edge and blitzes and whatnot, that seems like a pretty bad, a nightmare scenario potentially for Wake Forest.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Michael Katz from the Northeast Mississippi Tupelo Daily Journal. Michael, what have you got going on this weekend? Obviously, you're going to Winston-Salem, but what are your plans?
I will not have a car. I'm Ubering, so I'm going to be at the mercy of whatever is around my hotel. But I'm just very excited to try out the local cuisines. And by that, I mean like Sheetz. I've never been to Sheetz. And apparently there's a Sheetz right near my hotel. My East Coast friends tell me it's a godsend. Very excited to go.
Don't they do vinegar-based barbecue sauce too?
They might.
Yeah.
It's like a gas station with like a full restaurant inside, basically. So excited for that.
Like Oxford. Okay. Oxford. Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And yeah, no, I'm just excited to get to see a new place. I've never been to Wake Forest's campus or their stadium. I know it's a little bit on the smaller side, but I think sometimes those are some of the cooler stadiums when it's a little bit more intimate setting. I mean, Tulane last year was a really, really cool setting, and that was a really small stadium, and that was a blast. So
they have a nice looking stadium.
They do. And I've Wake Forest it's an ACC program. I'm expecting it to be fairly nice. I always love getting free food. That's one of my favorite parts of the travel. So yeah, excited to see what this team looks like on the road, because it's going to get harder from here. This is step one.
All right, Michael. Safe travels, buddy, and we'll see you next week, bud.
Sounds good, man. Appreciate you.